Hello, everybody. Welcome to Mindful Metal Jacket. I am Joe List. If you are listening at home, you won't even notice a difference. But if you're watching this on YouTube, I'm now recording the intro with video. And these intros are going to get even more awkward and uncomfortable because there's a video of myself in front of myself. I'm trying to look right in the camera so I don't see my big, dumb, goofy face. But anyways, this is Mindful Metal Jacket. Oh, I just looked at myself. Brutal. Really brutal. Anyways, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for listening or watching. If you're watching, this is a red letter date, whatever that means in the history of the show. This is the first video with a video intro. And normally I take about 25 takes to do these intros. But with the video, I don't want to do that because it'll be a pain in the ass. So I'm going to try to just get through this one. And again, if you're listening at home, it's just me and my little intros, which maybe they're too long. I don't know. How do you feel? Some people love the intros. Some people hate them. But either way, it's here. I'm here. You're here. Well, you're there. Wherever you are, I hope that you're feeling well right now, at least in this moment. The exercise I like to do, and I've mentioned before, I heard it first from Eckhart Tolle, or however you say his name, Tollemache. Pause for a moment, sit, stand, pause, be still, breathe, and ask yourself, what is actually wrong in this moment? And the answer is almost always nothing. You're worrying about something that has already happened or hasn't yet happened. My friend, a friend of mine, told me about. He went to his friend's house, and his friend had a little sign on the bathroom wall that said, "It's not going to go that way." And he had another sign by the door when you leave the apartment that said, "It's not going to go that way either." And I like that. So, just relax, let it be, as they say, as Paul McCartney once sang, actually more than once, a whole bunch of times. And then Sesame Street did the letter B, the letter B. It was really clever, great show. Yeah. Anyways, thanks for tuning into the show. Appreciate you. Subscribe to the YouTube, subscribe to the podcast, leave a nice review. I appreciate all the kind reviews. I appreciate all the kind messages and tweets, and tell some friends. That's the best thing you can do for the show. If you're enjoying it, reach out, tell a friend to check it out as well. Tweet it, post it, Instagram story, all that good stuff. It all helps. Would love to try to grow the show. And today we have a special guest, my new friend, Mike Wilner, who, if you're a sports fan, baseball fan, you might know as the voice of the Toronto Blue Jays for, I think, about 20 years. He recently has moved on from that job, as we discuss, and he's now writing for the Toronto Star, I believe it is. And he reached out. He's a fan of the show. And he's messaged me a few times saying how much he enjoyed the Gary Gulman episode of this show specifically. Check that out if you haven't already. And I said, hey, you should come on the show sometime. And he did. Now, I want to just warn everybody up front. I feel terrible. This is my fault, but there's quite a bit of baseball talk in this episode up front and towards the end. And it's my fault. I'm a baseball nerd, as is Mike. Obviously, he's in the field, and so I just couldn't resist talking baseball. So I will say there is a lot of the sort of body of the episode. There is a lot of anxiety talk. We talk about panic, anxiety, and worrying about what people think, and sort of imposter syndrome, and all of those good things. But there is some baseball talk up front. And then towards the end, this is a longer episode. I just went deep, as I am obsessed with, not obsessed, but a great admirer of play-by-play announcers. I wish I was one. And so we talk a little bit about that. Now, if you're an anxiety sufferer and a fan of the pod, and you also happen to be a baseball fan, you're in for a real treat. But I apologize to those who are going to find that boring, but maybe you'll find it interesting. Anyways, there's some interesting stuff in there. So I say keep an open mind, give it a chance, and you could always skip ahead 15 seconds at a time if you're listening to it as a podcast or whatever. But there is a lot of great stuff in there, in here, and I really, really enjoyed the hell out of it. It really made me smile and warmed my little cockles, and I think Mike had a nice time as well. And you can check him out. He's on Twitter, and he's writing articles about the Toronto Blue Jays all season. So I really enjoyed the episode. And again, apology. Well, maybe not apologies. It's my show. Fuck off. No, I go back. I go back to apologies if for all the baseball talk. If you hate baseball, but if you hate baseball, what are you doing? Maybe that is your problem. Bringing it back to mental health. Maybe you should open yourself up to some baseball, some passion for the great game, as it is quite relaxing and also quite anxiety inducing. I'll just tell this quick story. We'll get to the interview, but in 2003 October, I was hospitalized because I was no kind sweet way to say this. I was shitting blood, and I went. I was having extreme anxiety. I went to the hospital. They did all kinds of tests, and then finally the doctor said, "Have you been under a great deal of stress?" And I said, "Of course. It's Red Sox Yankees American League Championship Series here." And he said, "Well, you should relax. It's just a game." But I was hospitalized due to baseball, and probably a lot of other things, but. Anyways, that is that. I hope that you are doing well. And I might have read this quote already before in a past episode, but I'm rereading Pema Chodron's book, Welcoming the Unwelcome. Welcoming the Unwelcome. Oh, I stink. Wholehearted Living in a Broken-Hearted World. It's a fine book. I recommend it. There it is. Bang. There's another book behind it, and it's about sobriety. Anyways, here's a quote from Pema Chodron. How not to lose heart. As we individuals grow in our resilience, as we become better at staying conscious and not losing heart, we will be able to remain strong in challenging conditions for the long haul. This is within the capacity of all of us. Boy, I really screwed up a lot of things in this episode. Here it is. Enjoy my delightful conversation with the very kind, very sweet, and funny Mike Wilner. All right, we're live. This is recording. We're going. This is it. This is how all my podcasts start. This is it. It's happening. And Mike, thanks for having me, man. I'm excited to talk to you.
Well, thanks for having me. It's a real pleasure. Honestly, I'm a fan of yours. I'm a huge fan of like all things Cellar. So I'm really geeked to be doing this with you.
Oh, thanks.
And mental health and all things mental health.
Same. I love and you're a baseball guy. I love baseball, comedy, mental health. This is right in my my wheelhouse, to use what I think of as a baseball term, but it's probably not. What is wheelhouse? What is the epidemiology or whatever epidemiologist of wheelhouse? I mean, what is the actual meaning of wheelhouse?
I have no idea. I've always just heard of it as a baseball term. You know, it's to be in someone's wheelhouse is, you know, it's right where you want it. It's where you're the most comfortable and where things will work out the best, where you're the best at this. Cheesy 80s music, for example, my wheelhouse.
Right. Yeah, there must be some original thing. I'm sure there's a wheelhouse somewhere in the 1500s or something, but to me it's baseball.
Has horribly racist connotation.
I imagine, yeah, almost everything does. But I'm reminded of a baseball story that has something to do with mental health, or at least my personal psyche. Is in Little League, I was in, I don't know, it's probably different everywhere, but we called it, there was the major leagues and the minor leagues, and the minor league kids had to wear face masks, which I thought was hilarious. The kids in the majors didn't, but the kids in the minors did, and we thought it was so funny, the idea of they were a little less skilled, so they had to wear a face mask across their face because they might not get out of the way of the ball. But anyways, that was a side note. In my third year, it was 3 years, you're 10, 11, and 12, and in my third year, I was a really, really good hitter and the best hitter on the team, and I had a 3-0 count, and no one ever got the green light in Little League. Rarely do they in the big leagues. but no one ever did. And my coach, John Kelly, said, he called me over in the middle of my at-bat, and he said, you have a great idea of the strike zone. I'm going to give you the green light on this, but it has to be right in your wheelhouse. And I said, you got it. And of course, the pitch was over my head, and I swung at it.
Of course.
Because psychologically, I think I wanted everyone at the field to know that the coach had entrusted me, that I had the green light, and I felt like no one would believe me if I didn't swing at the 3-0 pitch. And then the next pitch, I was also out of the strike zone, and I walked. But I remember thinking that was just a little humble brag there. I just did, and he was mad at me.
Yeah, the best thing would have been if you'd swung at it and he didn't get mad at you. So, you could have told people, look, he told me to swing 3-0. Right. But yeah, and I think that happens to big leaguers too. I've talked to a lot of guys who say they're just not comfortable swinging 3-0. And even if they have the green light, even if they're that good, they'll still let a pitch go no matter where it is, just because, I don't know, once they hit it up into the elevator shaft on a 3-0 pitch and they'll never live it down.
Yeah, it's so weird. And again, I don't want to go deep dive baseball, so I'll try to keep it as mental health.
Healthy
I'll
go anywhere you want to take me.
But I'm a big believer, and I feel like, I don't know, the analytics, obviously you're like, make them throw a strike, but I'm like, you get a minimal amount of strikes. And if you're sitting on a fastball, every time there's a 3-0 with runners on base, I'm like, just hack at this thing. Just launch it. And obviously, if it doesn't work out, everyone hates the guy and hates the coach and all that stuff, or the manager. But I am a believer in swinging at the first pitch and swinging on 3-0. And if you think it's going to be a strike, I say hack at it. And that could be a metaphor for mental health.
It certainly could. But look, first pitch is put in play. Usually players hit well over 300 when they put the first pitch in play. And I remember a couple of years ago, it might have been 18, might have been 19, Blue Jays hit something like 6 home runs on 3-0 pitches. So you're absolutely right in both those philosophies. But then the opposite of that is, remember last year when Fernando Tatis swung at a 3-0 pitch and hit a 3-run homer to make the score like, I don't know, 17-6 or something.
Oh, right.
Then the Texas Rangers got very, very upset with him.
Oh, I remember that was like trending on Twitter at one point, and it ended up being this huge deal. And I never know where I fall on that in sports. With football, that happens too, is teams kicking a field goal when they're up 20 and all this stuff, or running up the score. And there's the one feeling of, well, keep us out of the end zone, or don't, throw the ball past me. What do you want me to do? We're adults. And I understand that. And I also understand the idea of like, we got it won. What are we doing?
I think if football, basketball, that's more valid. Hockey too, because there's a clock. Baseball without it, my philosophy in baseball has always been, once you stop trying to score, I'll stop trying to score.
Right. Yeah, that's a great point. And one of the great things about baseball is if you're down 40-0 with 2 outs in the ninth, you're going to lose, but you are still in it. Technically, at some point in all the other sports, it becomes impossible to score that much. But baseball is there's no clock, obviously, and really no official boundaries. Those lines go forever. There just happens to be a wall there. It's obviously a special game, as you know.
Forever and ever. I've seen a couple of 7-run bottom of the ninths. I saw Steve Pearce hit a walk-off grand slam twice in a week. So yeah, there are some really cool comebacks. One of the greatest. I mean, obviously my area of expertise is the Blue Jays, but I know you're a Massachusetts guy, and you were probably like a zygote then. But in 1989, in June, the Blue Jays played a game at Fenway Park where they were down 10-0 in the 7th inning, and they won.
Wow. It's funny. I don't specifically remember that game. That was right in my wheelhouse, as it were, when I was getting really obsessed. 88 is sort of when I was really starting to get really hardcore into it, which I have to remind people, and I'm going to bring this to mental health soon, I promise, but I have to remind people, when I was a kid, the Yankees weren't the big Red Sox rivals so much as the Blue Jays, because it was the Blue 89, 90, 91, 92, 93. The Yankees were pretty mediocre, kind of whatever. And it was always the Blue Jays at the top of the division. So that was, to me, was like the Red Sox and Blue Jays. They were like our big enemy. And I don't remember the specific game, but I remember there was a game at Fenway, must have been 90, 91-ish, or maybe it was 93 or something, because it might have, the Blue Jays were a powerhouse and the Red Sox somehow were just scoring on, I think it was on the bullpen. And there was a picture of Cito Gaston pouring Tylenol into his hand. And I remember they caught it on Nesson. And it was like this great moment of like the Red Sox had just scored 8 runs in an inning or whatever it was. And you just saw Cito pouring some kind of pills into his hands. And it felt like this moment of like, we're getting to them. And of course they got the last laugh, but.
Yeah, they did a couple of times. Poor Cito had a terrible back. It took him out of, I don't know, like 10 games in 92 or 93, and Gene Tennis had to manage. So that's probably what it was. But I get that. I mean, and I remember, I remember 90. It must have been 90, because that was the year the Red Sox won the division in 90. I remember in game 161 or 2, the Blue Jays were still in it. They weren't playing Boston, but I remember watching the Jays game, and then they cut to Fenway, and Tom Brunansky slid into the right field corner to make a catch, and that clinched the division for them. And then the Jays were out. So, it's a fun times at what a former colleague of mine still refers to as the urine-soaked hellhole that is Fenway Park.
Yeah, it's the best. And Jeff Reardon was on the mound for that Brunansky catch, and that was special. I loved it. And then they got swept by the A's, of course. And that was Morgan Magic, Joe Morgan. But now we're really we've lost the entire audience now at this point. So I want to talk obviously about anxiety. I love talking about anxiety, depression, all these mental health issues now. And I'm curious because you were a play-by-play guy for years and years, which is my dream job, and I think so many people's dream jobs. I would burn all of my comedy things to the ground to be a play-by-play guy for the Sox specifically. I love it. I've always been one of those guys since I was a kid that would do play-by-play. I still do it as I'm watching the games. And my first question, I mean, I want to get into anxiety, but let me ask you this, because I've always wondered this. Do you ever have, because I think of comedy as I'm on stage, I'm going through the next bit, 2 bits from now. What am I going to do after this? I'm down the road with bits. And I always like the analogy of like a duck. You just see him floating on the water, but underneath his feet are paddling like crazy. I'm always wondering, when you're calling a game and there's, they're down 2 and there's 2 men on and, whatever home run hitter's at the plate, is part of your brain thinking what the call will be if this guy hits a bomb, if he hits a homer? Is that in your mind? Or are you trying to be in the moment? How hard is it to stay in the moment? I guess that's several questions, but I'll just volley that back to you. Are you ever in your head going, it's a long drive, just in your head, and then he pops out or whatever?
Yes, but it never comes out, right? If anytime I've ever thought, what am I going to say if this happens? And that happens, what I wind up saying is completely different from what I imagined in my head. I don't know that actually happens. I mean, like you say, you're thinking a bit or 2 ahead. I don't know if that happens during the actual play-by-play, maybe like between innings or even before a game. I thought, oh man, you know what, if they, I rarely did I get to call the 9th inning. So I didn't get very many of those opportunities to have like, hey, they clinched, what am I going to say, or something like that. But anytime I've ever thought this would be something cool to say if this happens, once the moment happens, it's completely gone, and whatever comes out is based on what I was looking at. I think one of the coolest home runs I ever called happened in a spring training game. It was the last game of spring training in 2018. It was in Montreal, and there was a lot of extra emotion added onto it, because at the time I thought that it was the last chance I would ever get to call a game. Our lead guy, who had been doing it for 36 years, retired just before spring training, and they had told me that I wasn't going to get the job, that they were giving it to somebody else, but they let me do those 2 games in Montreal because the new guy had visa issues and couldn't get into Canada or had to get set up or whatever. So here I am sitting there thinking that I'm never going to call another major league game. And they were in Montreal. Vladimir Guerrero Jr. was 18 years old. They brought him to Montreal for these games, playing where his dad used to play. You know, he was a folk hero there, and there's that famous picture of when he was 2 years old, standing at second base, tipping his cap to the fans, standing beside his dad. So it was a whole big Vladdy weekend, and it was 0-0 with 2 out in the bottom of the 9th, and Vladimir Guerrero Jr. came to the plate. So obviously, I'm thinking, man, wouldn't this be something? And he hit a home run, and I can't remember what came out of my mouth, but it was certainly nothing that I thought I might say if he did. But that was the last time I called a walk-off, and again in the moment I thought that was it. So it was pretty heavy, but it was an awesome moment. And yeah, when he came to the plate with 2 out in the 9th, I thought, okay, if he goes deep, how cool would it be to, and I'll say this, and then he did, and I didn't.
Right. Well, I mean, again, like a metaphor for life, and that's why art exists, essentially, which is the great monologue at the end of Annie Hall, is that, you in art, you can at least create something ahead of time. You're like, I'll create this moment, and then I'll say the perfect thing in the moment. But in life, you're always thinking like, oh, I'll say this, or I'll behave this way, I'll act this way. This is going to be great. And then ends up just being a big pile of mush and everything. And then, I don't know about you, but I spend my life. I mean, do you have this? Because I podcast a lot. Obviously, I'm just social a lot. I spend so much of my life laying in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking, I said this. I can't believe I said this. I should have said that. Or what is this person thinking? How much anxiety and second guessing is there? Obviously, you're a public figure and you have a large audience. I mean, how much time are you spending thinking about a call you made or something you said or some face you made? Do you obsess over stuff like that, or does it roll off your back? What's your poison? Are we thinking anxiety, self-conscious? Do you hate yourself? Give me the goods here, because all I think is if I called a Major League Baseball game, I'd be going through every single out, hit, walk, and I just saying, I cannot believe I said that. I'm an idiot.
Well, it's too bad we didn't connect a couple of years ago when I could have brought you into the booth and had you, call a batter or two. I would have loved to have.
Oh, don't even say that
opportunity. But I'm no longer a major league broadcaster, unfortunately, so I can't do that anymore. My poison, I never really sat and obsessed very much over, something I said. I've only a couple of times said something where I thought, oh, if somebody hears that, they can get me fired. But luckily, nothing came of either of those things a long time ago. No, I mean, it bugs me when I blow a call. And again, another Vladdy story, his major league debut, I made the mistake. And again, this was a really exciting time. It was, he's the next great player. Everyone's super jacked over Guerrero making his debut. And in his second at bat, I'm calling it, and he hits a deep fly ball to the left field corner. And, the cardinal sin of broadcasting is to not watch the outfielders on a fly ball, because they will tell you how well that ball is hit. Right. There have been tons of balls that off the bat I didn't think going anywhere. And I see the left fielder just drop his shoulders and start talking to the center fielder. And I know it's like 83 rows deep. But the Vlad ball, I was watching ball, and I was not watching, I think it was Mark Canha in left field for Oakland. And I thought I caught up in the moment, the whole Vladiness of the day. And I thought it was going to be a home run. And I gave it that, and he caught it jumping at the wall, at least, right? It wasn't there's give it the big call and it's a pop up to the shortstop, but he caught it. And at the last second, as I'm watching the flight of this ball, I see the left fielder come into my field of vision, and I'm like, crap. And he caught it, and my voice broke on the call. I was about to say the next word was going to be gone, but the next word wound up being caught, and so yeah, that bugs me. It bugs me that Kevin Biggio's first major league home run, I said he hit it into the 500 level at Rogers Center, the upper deck, but he didn't. He hit it, I think, off the facing, maybe into the 400 level. So that, I mean, I'm still talking about that 2 years later to you now. That bugs me in that it's a special moment for this kid. This is his first major league home run. Here's the radio call, and I blew it. So yeah, that kind of stuff sits with me and will for a while. In 2003, I got my first opportunity to call Major League play-by-play, because there were the two broadcasters for the Blue Jays, legends in Toronto, Tom Cheek, who was the day one guy and called every 4,306 games in a row until he got brain cancer, and he had to call 911. They took him out of the booth and had surgery the next day. It was crazy. Yeah, but he's like my hero, and to get to work with him was insane. Jerry Howarth was the other one who came on in 1981 and called games until 2017. And Jerry got to work TV one day in 2002. It was my first year in the booth. And so it was just me and Cheek. And he said, "You can call the fifth inning." And I was like, "What, really?" And so that first time, the top of the fifth was 3 up, 3 down. The bottom of the fifth was 3 up, 3 down. And I found a way to screw up a call. So, I still remember that too, 20 years later. It was a pop-up to shallow left center. The shortstop, Chris Woodward, went out. The center fielder, Vernon Wells, came in. And I said, "Chris Wells makes the catch." And I still don't know which one of them caught it.
But that must be part of, I mean, I imagine there's some acceptance. And was Cheek, was he helpful and thoughtful? Did he say, "it happens, I've done it a million times"? I imagine he had some grace, or
no.
No.
Not have even noticed, to be honest. He might have been thinking about something else, but yeah, I mean, he always had the right thing to say, and he was graceful and kind and wonderful. Yeah, absolutely.
I think. Oh, sorry.
I was just gonna say, I'm beating myself up about 20 years later.
Yeah, of course. But I think he had the great call of "Touch 'em all, Joe. You'll never hit a bigger one," which is one of my favorite calls ever.
Yep. "Touch 'em all, Joe. You'll never hit a bigger home run in your life."
Yeah, that's a great one. Great.
And apparently it's because if you see in the bobblehead the leaping of Joe Carter, he told the story that he saw Joe jumping around like crazy and was afraid he was going to miss a base.
I feel like he did. Oh no, I'm thinking of McGuire. McGuire missed first when he hit 71 or 62.
Back,
I should say.
right?
Yeah, he had to go back. Yeah, and similarly with Carter jumping around, which was one of the most memorable World Series of obviously of my life. But I was 11 for that home run and one of the two walk-off home runs in World Series history, of course. But I love that call. And I was thinking about it, speaking of calls, I really am obsessed with baseball play-by-play. But I was thinking about it earlier with the kind of pre-planning a call in your head. And I think of 2000 NLCS. I think it was either AL or NL. I don't remember, but it was, I believe Bob Costas had the call. He said, "Start spreading the news, New York, New York." And I thought, even as I was 18 or whatever, I was like, this guy has been sitting on this for 6 weeks.
Right. And I'm not going to rip Costas. He's a legend, but absolutely. That's a call, that you knew he had planned in advance. And there, a lot of these guys are phenomenal with the wordsmithery, and if they want to take that time to think up and add up and come up with something, if X team wins, then that's awesome. The thing I loved about Cheek is it was 0 canned calls, nothing. He didn't have a personalized home run call. He didn't have anything like that. I did my best to emulate that. I prefer it that way. But if there's something that you prepare that's perfect and fits the moment and is great, then that's perfect too.
Yeah, absolutely. And the Costas thing was great. I thought it was great, but it was just one of those thoughts of like, he's sitting on that one. But it was great.
And I love that you can't remember which championship series it was because it was both New York teams in the World Series.
Yeah, I don't remember which one ended first. I feel like it was, and if someone made me bet money, I'm going to say the Yankees wrapped things up before the Mets did.
I would think I think the Yankees might have swept. Oh, they swept the Padres after. No, they swept the Mets, didn't they?
That was the Mets. Yeah, I think it was 5. I think the Mets might have stolen one in there, but I could be wrong about that actually. Maybe not.
You ask me about stuff that happened in the 80s, I'll know that like that.
But so I've seen you talk about, and you've messaged me about that Gary Gulman's special really, what word I want to use here, really meant a lot to you or touched you. Is depression something that you have dealt with in your life, or it was just because it was such a beautiful special?
It's not, and it was an absolutely beautiful special. But I think what I told you was that Gary Gulman's episode of this podcast with you was what really.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, and I go back to it all the time. I mean, part of me reaching out to you and so excited to talk to you is, I'd love you to hook me up with Alan one of these days if he works.
I just talked to Alan.
Canadians. He sounds phenomenal.
Yeah.
And when you guys talk about the things he says and that was the first time I listened to this podcast because I'm a huge Gulman fan. And one of the last things I did before the pandemic was see him in Clearwater at the beginning of March in spring training last year. And one of the great thrills of my life was when he name checked me from the stage. And I was like, oh, this is super cool. Listening to the two of you talk about Alan and talk about the things that you've gone through and those little advice things, like you can't get to sleep one night. Well, has there ever been a time where you haven't fallen asleep and what's happened, right? It's not going to be that bad. This is only your anxiety talking. This isn't real. All that stuff. And I've gone back to that episode a few times to just listen to it. And I've sent it out on Twitter to lots of people to say, look, this is a great list. The whole podcast is wonderful. Every episode is fantastic. But that one really, really did affect me in a very positive way.
Oh, that makes me feel good. Yeah, it's funny because it's so hard for me to remember all these episodes and what we talked about and stuff. But if that was an Alan heavy one, I mean, I literally just got off the phone with Alan just like an hour before this, my therapist, to anyone who's not familiar, but he really is the best. And he actually just told me the story. So I found all these, and I've talked about this on here a little bit. I just found all these notes that my mother wrote to a therapist that I saw when I was 7. So this is I'm not Johnny come lately here with the anxiety and phobia, but I found all these notes and it was like, really, I don't know what word to use. Sometimes I lose words. Maybe I wouldn't be a great play-by-play guy, but it was strange because it's all these notes when I was 7, and it's like Joe has a lot of phobias, and he's afraid. He doesn't talk about things. He checks behind the shower curtain when he goes into the bathroom, and he leaves the closet doors open. And it was all these things, and it was like Joe needs to spend quality time with his father, and it was all these things that I still am dealing with now. And one of the things that it says in these notes is that Joe is afraid of AIDS and cancer and death. And I was like 7, and I was just kind of saying, it's like, it's crazy that I was like afraid of AIDS when I was 7, but it was 1989.
And it was all over. That's all everyone was talking about. And I remember a Dennis Miller special from the late 80s. And he's, I understand, gone off the rails a little bit lately, but back then, I mean, and he said it's gone to the point where now you can just get AIDS by hoping you don't get it. But that's sort of what everybody felt like at the time, right? So yeah, I don't blame a 7-year-old for being scared of that.
Yeah, so it's funny because as always, I'm like, oh my God, I'm a mess. What a crazy person I was. Even at 7, I was afraid of AIDS, and it sounds funny, but so Alan just told me this story about he was in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. I hope he doesn't mind me telling the story, but he's in Jackson Hole, Wyoming with his family, and they were, going cross country on a camping trip, and they're in a lake, and it's like him and his son, who's about a little bit older than, maybe he's like 12, and there's like a moose walks into the lake and starts swimming across the lake as the sun is setting, and Alan's thinking, God, this is perfect, and he's holding his son's hand in the lake, and his son says, Dad, I'm obsessing about AIDS. And we laugh because it's like such a funny thing to have this perfect moment in this kid. And first of all, this kid being like feeling comfortable enough to say and identify it that way, where I would just have been like, sobbing or whatever. But it made me feel better in that he always has a great story to make me feel like, all right, so I'm not completely psychotic. It's not crazy to be worrying about AIDS, but I felt unprotected is really the lesson as a kid, that nobody was there to be like, no, you're not going to get AIDS. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, and I think that's valid. I don't remember. I mean, I was a teenager when AIDS was AIDSing at the its highest rate. So yeah, everyone was scared about it, and everyone was wary. And but you knew that if you're not having sex, if you're not having unprotected sex or sharing needles, you're not going to get AIDS. I don't know that was ever a big thing for me, but I mean, it's my cocktail is generally anxiety, panic. I've never been one of those I hate myself people, I don't think. But yeah, I mean, I had my first panic attacks that I remember on the subway when I was 12.
Wow.
Maybe a little bit older. It was right around the time where the Tylenol scandal happened, where the guy in Chicago was putting cyanide pills in Tylenol bottles, and this is why we have the vacuum seal now on all the medication. But I remember that I ate, I think, a caramel bar, and it tasted kind of weird, and I thought, oh crap, did someone put cyanide in this thing? And that sort of led to that spiral, and that was the first one.
And so what did like a panic attack for you look like at that time? Was it just mental? Was there physical aspects? Were you shaking or having trouble breathing, or what did it look like?
Felt like I was having trouble breathing, and that just sort of fed on itself, and that got worse and worse, and I wound up calling 911, and
oh wow,
I didn't know what was going on. Yeah, and they all showed up in the subway station, and it was very strange and weird. But yeah, that's what it was. It was that time. It was I couldn't breathe. Other times it's been like racing heart. I have this wonderful combination of things where I have the reflux, so I always have some semblance of chest pain.
Oh God.
I have a bad neck, so there's always something pain radiating down my left arm.
Oh,
so I've
God.
always got symptoms of a heart attack, which is wonderful.
Right.
So sometimes, I still don't know what the triggers are, if there are specific triggers or if there are any, but yeah, a lot of times I will talk myself into thinking that I'm having a heart attack. Less so now, because here in Canada, where we have wonderful socialized medicine and universal health care, I've managed to get a couple of heart stress tests in the last 3 years. So having that, getting through that and knowing that that's okay has helped me a lot. But yeah, otherwise I pretty much I'll always think I'm having a heart attack.
Yeah, I've had that so many times throughout my life too, because of course, anxiety, panic, one of the big things that can happen is tightening chest pains. And I've manifested every kind of physical thing that you can from anxiety, stomach ache, chest pain, headache, eye pain, pins and needles, all the tooth pain, all these crazy things. And again, I've gotten much better because now I know the first thing I can think is it's probably this. And I love, and I probably mentioned it on this show before too, my friend Greg Stone told me about this thing because he was a nurse or worked in a hospital, I forget what exactly his title was, but they have a term like looking for a zebra. Like if you're in New York City and you hear like a clip clop, it's most likely a horse because there's horses in New York. But people like myself go, oh my God, I bet it's a zebra, And so they'll even say, we got a guy looking for zebras over here. And I love that terminology. If it sounds like a horse and you're in a place where there's horses, it's probably a horse. If you're 28 years old and fit, you're probably not having a heart attack. But there's always the chance you are, and you start to get older, and things are going to go wrong. This is the problem with hypochondria, is that, or anxiety, is that eventually things do go wrong. And so there's always that part of you that's like, what if it is a heart attack and I'm just ignoring it? I'm just an asshole going, it's probably just whatever.
Totally. I'm lucky enough to live down the block from my ex, who is a flight attendant, well versed in all sorts of first aid and all that kind of stuff. So if there's something that's real bad, I'll check in with her. But I've also thought, I should probably have some aspirin around the house. Isn't that what you're supposed to do? If you feel like it, take an aspirin, which I don't have. But I talked to my doctor a lot, and he said to me many times, look, if it's a heart attack, you'll know.
Right.
And I don't necessarily believe him, right? Because I replay these stories in my head about, this guy was driving around with somebody, and then they said, he just said he wasn't feeling well. And 2 seconds later, he's driving the car into the side because he's having a massive heart attack and stuff like that. So that's definitely something that preys on my mind. But again, the tests that I've had recently help allay that fear. And the fact that it all often happens around the same time, right? Like 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning, you're lying in bed, ready to go to sleep or trying to go to sleep. And all of a sudden this hurts and then which arm is this? And that I take a little bit of solace in that. That it's this is happening at a time where I often feel this way. So it's probably, as you would say, a horse and not a zebra.
Yeah, exactly. And you start to get more wisdom. And like I've dealt with this before. The thing I've heard about heart attack, which is amazing, because like again at 22, I'm thinking I'm going to have a heart attack, but which there's always a story. Everything you're worried about, there is a story of it happening to someone. There have been 18-year-olds that had heart attacks, which is I think probably maybe not even the early. I might have been worrying about heart attacks when I was 13 or whatever. But the thing my uncle, who's a paramedic, said is, with a heart attack, there's no way to move or breathe that relieves it. And I've laughed about that because I've called my uncle before in the past, years ago, when I was worse with this stuff, and going, I think I'm having a heart attack. If I lay down, it doesn't hurt so much, or if I do this. And he's like, if you're having a heart attack, you can't bend over or lean back or breathe through your nostrils and have it get better.
Right.
It's not one of those things. And I've had that too with pains where I'm like, I think I have, cancer of this or that. And my therapist, Alan, has said, cancer doesn't come and go. It comes and stays. It's not a thing that's, your kidney hurts for an hour and then it doesn't hurt for 2 days and then it hurts for an hour. So that helps.
Yeah. And I think I've heard people say, maybe you say in the past, that when you get to that point where you think you have something, then you're going through the same things as if you do, like not the physical whatever, but if you convince yourself you have cancer, then you're going through this whole thing with the same sort of stuff that someone who has it will go through. And people, have had cancer 20, 30, 40 times without ever having it. But you go through the whole mental energy that scare puts you in. I don't know if that makes any sense, but I mean, it's happened to me a million times. If like you said, maybe you wouldn't be a good play-by-play guy because you couldn't come up with a word. Every time I can't come up with a word, I'm like, well, this is my 14 concussions catching up to me, and that's it. I'm on the slippery slope downward, and this is the beginning of the end of my brain function. But so far, so good.
Right. Now, you've mentioned having your first panic attack when you were 12, I think. What's the most recent panic attack, and how many have you had bouts of having them frequently? Like I've had times in my life where I was having them almost daily for like a month or two or whatever. Have you ever been in that kind of cycle where you're then having anxiety about having a panic attack, the idea of having a panic attack?
That's interesting. I don't know if I mean, I guess so. Yeah. I've had the anxiety about having it. The most recent was probably a week or a week and a half ago. um, there have been some waves during the pandemic where it's been worse than, it's weird because there are some times where I'm not anxious at all, and there are some times where I can't go to sleep without taking an Ativan. But yeah, there was starting this new job sort of kicked into way more anxiety than I thought I was going to have. I had I've been a broadcaster for 20 years, worked in radio for 25, getting paid, and 7 years before that not getting paid in like university radio and stuff like that. And through a lot of it, I'd done a lot of writing, blogging, websites, columns, whatever. And then I got fired, and I was remarkably zen about that. Like, it was so weird that there was hardly any anxiety about being fired. And then I got this new job, and I'm now a columnist for the Toronto Star, which is the biggest paper in Canada. And it's a wonderful job, and it's a fantastic gig, and it's an incredible landing spot. And I sat down to write my first column, which was, hey, this is why I'm at the Star. And it was great. I don't know, the column was great. It was fine, I'm sure, but it was fine to write. And then I wrote the second one where it was actually a baseball story, right? This isn't about me anymore, or about this new job, or about my journey. It's a baseball story, and this is what I'm going to be doing. And I had this weird crisis of confidence, like, this might not be good enough. What happens if, I'm doing this and I'm revealed all of a sudden as this enormous fraud, right? Who can't do anything. All I could do was talk on the radio. And I think the week sort of leading up to that, and a few days after that, I wasn't feeling great. And there were a couple of not huge panic attacks in there, but there were some panic attacks in there. And I found that just to be so odd. And I have a good friend who goes through the same stuff, and we talk about this stuff with each other a lot and help each other through it. And she said, it's the new job. And I'm like, no, it's not the new what? How could it be the new job? I've been doing this my whole life. But I think that's probably what it was, for sure. And I even had a fever for like a week or so. Wow. A very, very slight one. But yeah. And I think it was because I didn't know if I knew what the hell I was doing, when it's something that I've been doing for, like, I wrote probably 1,500 columns when I was on the radio. But this is a whole new ball game, writing for a real honest to goodness newspaper with like editors and stuff.
Right. Interesting. So that reminds me of when the last time I had a real run of panic attacks was like spring, summer 2017, which was leading up to my wedding. I was getting married in August of 2017, and my therapist said the same thing. In fact, that's when I started seeing him, was in like March, because I felt like I was really unraveling. And my therapist, after seeing each other for a few times, he said, "Yeah, you're getting married. That's what's happening." And I took it personally, of course, and I was like, "But I love my wife. This is like the right woman. I'm not doubting it or anything like that. I'm not having cold feet." And he goes, "No." He's like, "No, you're marrying the right woman." He's like, "I can tell from talking to you." He's like, "But it's traumatic. Even good is traumatic. Even if you get a raise, or if they say, hey, you're calling the World Series, or whatever it is, a marriage, a kid, it's any kind of change can be traumatic." This is my therapist talking. And they said that's what it is. It's a huge life change. It's a huge commitment. Your whole family's getting together, and it's a massive change. And it was a relief, because I took it as like, oh my God, it must be, am I making a huge mistake? And it was like, no, it's just a change. And that's why, going back to Alan, he's so good, because you think, I got him licked here, I'm going to say this, and he's going to just come apart. And he's like, no, that's just that. That's not a big deal. Don't worry about that. You're getting married. It's traumatic. So it sounds like that is it. I mean, it's just a big change, and it's traumatic to have a different gig, I think.
I think so. And maybe it's also part of mourning the old gig, right? Which I don't know that I really did. And I don't know if it'll hit me until there's a game and I'm not calling it, because, but maybe, but this is, I mean, it's not to say that what I'm doing now isn't fantastic. It really is. It's another dream gig. But you just reminded me, I had a massive panic attack, maybe the worst one I've ever had, on the plane on the way to my honeymoon. And I think that one stemmed, like, it was from the moment we took off to the moment we landed, and maybe even a little bit farther. And it was embarrassing as hell, because this is the person I've been married to for 30 hours who'd never seen me like this before. But I think it stems from some deep-seated belief, which is weird given the life that I've had, that good things don't happen to me. Like, I'm not lucky in that way, right? Like, I don't get to have nice things. And meanwhile, to be a big league play-by-play broadcaster for forever, and to be, I have two wonderful children, and I've got a great life, and I still walk around believing that good things don't happen to me for some reason.
Yeah, no, I have the exact same thing, or somehow that I don't deserve them and I'm going to be punished for them. And I'm not even like a religious guy, but I'm like, God's going to punish me, this God. And it reminds me of Seinfeld, the TV show, and George said, God will never let me be successful. And he goes, but you don't believe in God. And he says, well, I do for the bad things.
That's right.
But yeah, I feel the same way of like, I shouldn't be enjoying this for some reason, or nothing. I can't have anything great. And in reality, I look around and I'm like, I got a lot of great stuff. I've been extremely fortunate. But yeah, it is hard too with a partner who's seeing you have this anxiety attack or panic attack, and naturally they take it personally in some way of like, are you all right? What is this? And exactly the same thing. We're in like, Paris, and I'm freaking out, and she's like, what is wrong with, like, it's not going to get any better than this. And I have this thing where then I start to spin that I'm like, I'm not even enjoying like the greatest moment of my life, which sends you deeper into anxiety, which I guess you got to just accept. It's all about acceptance and not fighting, I guess.
Whereas we learn that now in our, advanced, well, my advanced, not so much your advanced age, but you're, you got a dozen years. I've got a dozen years on you, but yeah, it's great that you're learning all that stuff, and that I'm starting to figure it out too, and that it's to just let it go and stay. That whole mindfulness thing, right? Stay in the present, and don't worry about what could come of it. It's taken me a long time to learn that, and I don't know that I'm done learning it, but it really is. I mean, that's the only way to get through all this stuff.
Yeah, it's so difficult because it's all counterintuitive to be accepting, because your intuition is to fight it, like a panic attack, to try to like wrestle out of it and undo it. And it's almost like quicksand. You have to kind of just let it happen and then eventually crawl out, or whatever, however quicksand works. But it is that thing of trying to force it that makes it so much difficult and so much worse. And it really is counterintuitive. And I don't know. It's so much easier. It's one thing to learn it, and then to practice it becomes even more difficult, which it does help, because like I just had this where I was in a high stress situation. I was feeling like pins and needles in my face and hands. And I was like, oh, this is probably from anxiety. This is like not a number one, but like a top symptom of anxiety. But then there's part of me that goes, what if it's Bell's palsy? Isn't that something that, and I start Googling it, even though if you Google pins and needles, face and hands right now, it'll talk about either frostbite or anxiety. It's like, oh, that's probably anxiety. But then there below that is, I think it's Bell's palsy, where your face kind of does whatever. And
never
so I'm
Google.
like, and I'm like, let me research that. Yeah, and that's what my therapist is always like. You can't Google. He's like, think of it. I'm a recovering alcoholic. He's like, think of it like alcohol. You're just someone that can't Google.
Nobody should Google symptoms of anything. It can't possibly lead to anything good.
No, it almost never does. So I want to ask, because you've referenced it a couple of times, and I don't know what you could say and can't say, but you've talked about being fired, or you're no longer play-by-play. Can you talk? Was there a controversy, or what happened there?
No, basically, yeah, I don't know how. Well, I mean, there's nothing deep to go into. That happened on your Thanksgiving. I got at a meeting with my boss, and I was sitting right here, and uh, he popped on the Zoom, and he said, "Hey, how you doing?" And then this other window popped open, and he was an HR guy, and I was like, "Oh, you got to be kidding me!" As soon as I saw the HR guy, I knew that they were firing me. I didn't know why, and all I was told was basically, we're going in a different direction, and I wish I had said I'd like to go in that direction too, uh, but I wasn't thinking at the time, and that was it. It was like a 3-minute conversation, and
Wow.
it was over. They haven't hired a replacement yet. Don't know who that's going to be,
Could you
and I
put in a
really
word? Because I really,
I have a feeling it's going to be someone who played big league baseball before.
that's really not
But
fair.
otherwise, I don't know. I don't know how much of a word my word will do
Right.
in this situation. But yeah, that it would be cool to see you in that chair.
And so, because it's interesting now, because I think you had tweeted about it, and I saw it. And this day and age, when you see someone leaving a job, I just assumed, they caught you doing blow in the clubhouse, or you said some crazy thing on air, but nothing like that. Just
Nope, never even done blow in the clubhouse.
no, come on.
No, not even once.
This is a
No, there
safe
was
place.
not. There was really nothing. There was no controversy. There was no, and I was. They said it. This has nothing to do with your performance. This has nothing to do with your ability. This is just, we're making a change, and it, it's their ball. If they want to pick it up and go home, or if they want to play with it without me, then it's really up to them. So there's nothing I could do, and it sucked, and it still sucks. I was hoping to do that into my old age, and be one of those guys who broadcasts 30, 40 years with the same team. Um, but yeah, no, that doesn't get to happen.
Now, how has there been like an outpouring from the fan base
It was
saying,
really
"Oh,
nice, really nice stuff.
yeah,
Really nice from a lot of people. Yeah, brought me to tears a couple of times. They told me on Thanksgiving. They announced it on the Friday, and that whole Friday and Saturday, I just sort of sat watching Twitter, and 98% of it was just really nice and wonderful, and there are people who said, "You're the reason I'm a baseball fan," or "You're the reason that I got into um, podcasting about the baseball, or writing about it, or my father and I can only talk about baseball, and you were sort of the soundtrack," and it was really beautiful and heartfelt and wonderful stuff. The beautiful thing about being a Blue Jays broadcaster is that you get a whole country. Like,
right,
I know in the States it's a big deal when a broadcaster does a national game. Every game I did was a national game. Our broadcast network goes from coast to coast to coast. So, people in Saskatchewan are telling me how they have the radio on while they're out on their tractors, and listening to me all the time. And I've been, when you're around for 20 years, um, it's weird that people grow up listening to you, but people, that was so strange to wrap my head around. But as someone who gets a lot of crap on Twitter on a regular basis, that was really, really, really nice.
yeah." That's an interesting thing, and there's almost like hearing you talk about it. There's almost a strange part that you're almost grateful it happened in a small way, because it allows you to get so many nice. I'm sure you get a lot of nice messages anyway.
I would have preferred it happened in like 20 years to get
Of course,
the same
of course,
messages.
yeah.
But
Well,
and there was a similar, not the same level, but a wonderful outpouring too when we announced that I got this new job, and that people were so happy for me that I'd landed on. So many people said you're going to land on your feet, and I wasn't sure, because I've seen so many people lose jobs in broadcasting and never get back into it. So the fact that I landed where I did is phenomenal, and a lot of people again said some really, really nice things last month or earlier this month when we announced that.
Yeah, it's interesting because, and you kind of touched on it with play-by-play, because obviously I'm a huge sports fan and baseball fan, but play-by-play, particularly in baseball, because it's so conversational, it really is an intimate thing where you feel like you're friends with the people. I really feel like I know them, and as a lot of these guys that I've grown up with for almost 40 years now, or whatever, 30 something years, I start to get worried as Al Michaels ages, of like, and Keith Jackson is what meant so much to me, and all these guys. You start to get like this personal thing because you realize you've spent hours and hours and hours in listening to them, and you get to know their sense of humor and their all these things about them. And like you said, baseball is something that is shared. Like my relationship with my father is defining in my life, but that's something we've always had since we were kids, is that, and you share that third voice. And was on the other side of play-by-play person being let go with Don Orsillo. I don't know if you know Don, who is the voice of the Red Sox and tremendous broadcaster and just a really funny guy. And he was let go, or however it worked with the Red Sox. His contract was up and they went a different direction with Dave O'Brien, who's a fine broadcaster himself, obviously, but Orsillo. And I was like heartbroken. And the Red Sox had won the World Series with him, and it like almost made me cry. And similarly, I tweeted at him and I was like, I hope he gets this message and sees it. And I can't remember what I wrote, but something along the lines of, I love you. This is like bumming me out or whatever. And so I've sort of been on the other end of your situation. He's now the voice of the Padres, and I have the MLB package, and I'll throw on the Padres games just to hear my old friend. But it's almost like looking at an ex on Instagram or something. You're like, that's not our guy anymore. But it does feel like an intimate relationship because you've spent hours and hours and hours with that person. I'm sure you've obviously experienced that as your own being a baseball fan.
Yeah. I mean, I did with Tom Cheek, and then to get to work with him was incredible. I was listening to him on the radio when I was 7 years old, and I got to work with him. It was incredible. And it is, the impact is amazing. Because people feel like they know you. And I hosted the post-game call-in show too for 17 years. So I was always interacting with fans all the time. And that's just another window into who you are, and the back and forth. And social media does that too, allows us to reach, people that we've never even dreamed of being able to talk to 15, 20 years ago. But it's, people see you as a friend and as someone they really know, which is, I mean, I totally get it, but it's a really surreal experience because but so many encounters that I've had with people who are complete and utter strangers to me, they feel like they've known me for decades.
Yeah, it's interesting. I have a very similar experience, obviously, and it's funny because even talking to you and talking about someone like a Don Orsillo, or for me, Sean McDonough, and these guys, it reminds me that I have that role in other people's lives.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's really interesting, and sometimes I'll meet people after a show, and they'll say, what's going on with your dad, or how's your whatever, and I'm like, oh, right. And it is a wonderful thing. And like you mentioned, you have to deal with a lot of negativity and stuff, and people telling you suck and they could do better at your job, which is painful. And somehow those, as human beings, have a negativity bias. Those kind of stick more.
Sure.
Of course. But
you suck hits harder than 500 you're amazing. So.
Of course, yeah, it really does. So it is a beautiful thing that I guess we get to experience, and it's a good reminder to be grateful for those things and those moments, I guess.
And it's a reminder for me too. It's a reminder that, I mean, you really have to be nice to everybody, because this, I've heard people talk about other people who they met once for 15 seconds, who was rude to them, and that colors your whole experience. That guy's an asshole because I met him once for 10 seconds and he wasn't super wonderful nice. So it took a long time to get my head around the fact that, and it sounds so egotistical and unseemly, and I don't like the way it sounds, but the truth is that you or me, when somebody meets us, it makes way more of an impact usually than us meeting them. Like if I've met 50 people in a day who are all big baseball fans, they're like, I met Mike Wilner. And I'm like, this isn't really not that big a deal.
Right.
But I mean, and then, 15 years later, you see them again and they're, oh, I met you that time at the thing, and you have zero memory of
Right.
it at all. But that impact that you make means that first impressions are often only impressions, and that the people carry with them for years and years and years when you're even a semi-public figure like you and I are.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting. I remember hearing a thing, or someone quoted Michael Jordan about how he dressed so nice always, and they said, when I walk from the gym to the car, he's like, there's thousands of people trying to get this one glimpse of me in that one moment of your life. So I, wanted to look his best or whatever for that moment. And I remember saying that
you and I are exactly like Michael Jordan is the takeaway from this.
100%. And I dress as well as him too, with my Comedy on State hoodie and my Iowa State t-shirt. But I remember hanging out with a big name drop here, Colin Quinn, years ago when we were walking around and went to the subway, and he kept getting recognized. And I said, man, what a incredible gift that he's a level of celebrity that he can walk around and not be mobbed or anything. But I'm like, you are making so many people's day just by them bumping into you and seeing you. It's so exciting. And of course, Colin has one of the great jokes of all time, so many of them, but he had a great joke about his level of celebrity. He saw three guys moving a couch and they went, Colin Quinn, hey, can you grab this end? And he's like, that's my level of celebrity. But no, it is a great gift. And I don't want to take up too much of your time here, but I do want to baseball nerd out at the end here and ask some baseball questions. Do you have a favorite play-by-play guy, or who are like a couple of your favorites? It's probably hard to pick number one, I guess, but
easily Tom Cheek was number one for me.
Yeah,
he was the sound of my whole childhood and youth, and getting to meet him was unbelievable, and having him like get to the point. I only worked with him for 2.5 years before he got sick, but getting to the point where he could be playful with me on the air, and we would just have a good time. He would crack jokes and try to trip me up, and it was amazing. But he's the gold standard for me. But obviously, Vin Scully is ridiculous, and there are so many really good play-by-play people around the game, but the two of them definitely stand out. Both Hall of Famers, so that's cool.
Yeah, I mean, Scully really is amazing, and obviously I've never been a play-by-play guy, but to do entire games by yourself just seems like the most Herculean task to me.
I've done it once, and it was more than enough.
Yeah, I can't imagine. Now, I don't know if you know all these guys. I mean, do you know Kenny Albert by any chance? Do you know him personally?
Now, a lot of those U.S. national guys, like I know the teams in the American League. I know the team broadcasters, but the big national guys, I haven't run into a lot of.
Well, so I listened to him once, and he said he's one of the only guys, I think maybe the only guy, I don't want to speak out of turn, but I remember hearing that, and I could be wrong, that does all four major sports. And he said, and I thought this was surprising, is that hockey is actually the easiest sport, because he's saying it's constant. You're just saying what's happening. And baseball, he said, was the most difficult because it is so conversational, and there's so much downtime that you have to fill and be interesting during. What is your take and feeling on that?
I don't know that hockey's the easiest. I did a lot of hockey when I was in university, and I loved it. And it's so much fun because it's so fast, and there's always something happening. And it's true, there's no downtime, and all the downtime is filled by the other guy. So it's a lot of fun to broadcast. It's difficult in that. I mean, it's not difficult if you're just saying, well, Toronto shoots it into the Boston zone, and then, Boston. And I once did a game where I was the color commentator, it was an Eric Lindros Junior Hockey Memorial Cup game, which is the championship of Canadian Major Junior Hockey. And it went into 3 overtimes, and the play-by-play guy never bothered to learn anybody's name. So he just used team names the whole time. But so that's, I always found that difficult. I had my charts in front of me, and this is the lines, and this is the defensive pairings, and the numbers were huge. And so I found that difficult, but so much fun to do hockey. Baseball is, I've always thought of it as like a 3-hour conversation that you're having with your partner and with the person who's listening. And it is way more difficult because there's so much more time to fill. But at the same time, I often wrote down some notes about, I'm going to want to talk about this, and I find time to talk about this and this. And I very rarely would find time to do it because I was so into the game and into trying to sort of paint the picture of what was happening on the field. But yeah, it can be a long, like last year, when the Blue Jays were in the playoffs, the second game of this best 2 out of 3, they lost the first game. In game 2, they're down 7-0 in the second inning. Those last 7 innings were real long.
Yeah, I imagine, especially towards the end of the season, you've been working with the same partner for a long time. You start to run out of stories, and sometimes, and some of the great moments I mentioned, Don Orsillo, him and Remy would have these great moments where they're just laughing and being silly, and start to look into the crowd and try to come up with something to talk about or find, and there's only so much you can really let it breathe for long periods of times, because at some point you're like, they're going to start hitting the TV going, what's going on? My sound is screwed up or whatever, which that would give me anxiety. I mean, I have that anxiety a lot, and I've gotten much better with this podcast, particularly of like, how am I going to fill an hour? What if we hit a dead spot? What's going to happen? And I can't even imagine 162 games, 3-hour, 4-hour games, just going, oh my God, I have nothing. I've told every story, and it really is tricky. And sometimes with baseball too, the pitcher's walking around the mound and the batter's leaving the batter's box, and it's hard to just go, okay, here comes the pitch, because there's another 8 seconds before the pitch comes.
Yeah, but I mean, we had, bless his heart, Jason Fraser, who's the Blue Jays, I think still the all-time appearance leader, and it took him a good 15, 20 minutes to throw every pitch. So, the guy who came into like 1,100 games and his innings are taking forever. He's a lovely man. But yeah, and those are the points in time where you look around the field, and, doing radio, I don't have the pictures to tell me to tell stories for people. And on TV, you can take a lot longer of a breather.
Sure.
Radio, you if you don't talk long enough, there's a siren goes off and you think you're off the air. But that's when you talk about, oh, look, the shortstop is kicking at the dirt, and the center fielder's doing deep knee bends, and these guys can't stand how long this guy's taking just as much as we can't stand how long this guy's taking.
Right, and I imagine you could start talking about Bull Durham or whatever it is, or stuff like that. I want to let you go, but I want to ask one more hard-hitting journalism question here. Joe Buck, where do you fall on Joe Buck as a fan? Because I'm a guy, and I'll just give my thought. I love Joe Buck. I think he's fantastic. I really do. But he is a guy, people loathe this guy. Yeah. I mean, they really hate him. And I always thought this was so fascinating that somehow every fan base thinks he is a homer for the other team. I know Red Sox fans that are convinced that Joe Buck is obsessed with the Yankees. He loves the Yankees. And the exact Yankee fans think he just blows all the Red Sox players. I find him to be first class. I really think he's fantastic. And I don't know how much you can say. I don't want you to get in trouble here. As a fan,
I'm not in the industry anymore.
Okay, great. Yeah. So do you like him? Does he? Because I think the big knock on him is he doesn't get excited enough. But I'm a guy who likes an understated, let it breathe. I love Dick Stockton. Just if it stays fair, home run. I like that kind of stuff. The Bernie Carbo home run. He says deep to center. We're tied up. I like that kind of stuff. So that's the knock on him. Where do you fall on Joe Buck?
I was someone who was the opposite. I used to always say exciting things are excited, so I'm going to get excited about them. But when you're a national guy like Joe Buck is, first of all, he's doing it perfect if everybody thinks that he hates their team, because that means he's playing it as down the middle as you could possibly be.
Right.
I think he's an excellent broadcaster. There's no question about it. I have no hate in my heart at all for Joe Buck. The weird thing is I've really only heard him do football, because, for years and years and years, even though the Blue Jays were never in the playoffs, I was still working the playoffs because we broadcast them across Canada on the radio, and we use the ESPN feed. So I listened to all these games on the radio and never really listened to TV broadcasts of national baseball games. But I mean, he's a very skilled broadcaster, and I every time I've heard him, I've enjoyed it. And I totally get why everybody thinks that he hates their team, but I think that just means that he's doing a really good job. But I've heard way more World Series called by Dan Shulman than I've heard called by Joe Buck.
Interesting. I like Shulman as well.
By the way, you want a nice little story here? Talk about
please.
Imposter syndrome and feeling like you don't measure up. If you reach the point where you're the play-by-play broadcaster for a major league team, one would think that you're probably the best at your job in your town, right? Sometimes even in your state, you're the best one. Thanks to Dan Shulman, I'm not even the best to come out of my 600-person primary grade school, because we went to the same school.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I've been chasing that for a long time.
I'm sorry to hear that.
He's a wonderful human, by the way.
No,
couldn't be nicer.
No, he stinks. I hate him now. No, he's great. And I just want to say for my own thing, Sean McDonough, who's another guy. I don't know if you know him at all, but he is my favorite broadcaster of all time because he just has this great, subtle Boston sarcasm. You can tell he's got a little bit of a chip on his shoulder, and he's just good enough a homer, but he's a great national guy, and he's made me laugh. And he has my all-time favorite baseball call in history, where it was a game. I think it was just a local game, Nesson or whatever. It was Red Sox, and I forget. It might have been Cecil Fielder or something like that for the Tiger. And Tim Wakefield was pitching, a knuckleball pitcher, and he threw a knuckleball, and you could tell right as he released it, it didn't knuckle. And Sean McDonough's call, he goes, uh-oh. And he said that. And Cecil Fielder hits a ball, the left field that has not landed yet. 600-foot bomb, but as soon as it came out, the whole call was uh-oh. And just magical call.
I wish that I'd ever had the presence of mind to do that. I actually saw the first knuckleball that Tim Wakefield ever threw as a pro in A-ball. I would broadcast for his A-ball team, the 1989 Welland, Ontario Pirates. He was a third baseman hitting about $120 in his second year at short season single A. And then one game in August, he came out on the mound and we're like, what the hell is this? And he was just flipping up knuckleballs. And 2 years later, he's in the major leagues.
Wow.
My Sean McDonough did the 1992 World Series for CBS when the Jays won. So I'll remember him forever for that. My closest to the was in 2015 when 2015 or 16. I think it was 16, because the Blue Jays were sort of teetering towards the end of the season after that great year in 15. The Red Sox, I think, wound up winning the division that year, but the Jays clinched at Fenway. The next to last home series of the season was against Baltimore, and Mark Trumbo came up to the plate. And I said to Joe Siddle, who was the color guy at the time, who in his, by the way, final professional game with the Pawtucket Red Sox, caught a Tomo Oko perfect game. But I said to Joe, it's interesting, Mark Trumbo is leading the league in home runs, and he's got 45 or however many home runs he had, and he hasn't hit one against the Blue Jays all season, and this is like the 19th time they've played each other, and he homered on the next pitch.
Wow.
Yeah.
Those are always fun. By the way, McDonough on that 92 World Series or 93 World Series, he had a great call himself on the Joe Carter home run, which was Blue Jays win and still world champions. He did the fight boxing call.
Nice.
Still world champs. He had a great one there. And then there was another game. Sorry, now I'm just completely off the rails here with mental health, but
it's all good for our mental health to reminisce like this.
I'm having a great time, but he had a couple other great ones. He had Red Sox Indians had a nice little rivalry mid 90s or late 90s, I should say. And Pedro hit Junior Ortiz, and Junior Ortiz started barking at Pedro. And McDonough said something along the lines of, he's right. How dare Pedro Martinez throw at Hall of Famer Junior Ortiz? And I love that McDonough wasn't afraid to throw in a little that just Boston Irish sarcasm. And another game, I think this might have even, maybe it wasn't a national game. It must have been a local game, but it was interleague play, and it was Giants Red Sox. And he said, a lot of people ask me, is anyone a real jerk? Have you ever met any jerks in the game? And it was on Barry Bonds. He said, that guy right there is a jerk. It's something along those lines. And he just said it on the broadcast. And I thought, wow, this is wild. He's really just thrown it out there that Bonds is an asshole, which of course everyone had said before, but to hear it on a broadcast, I was
that's really something.
Taken back by it.
That's not something I ever did. I only met Bonds once, but and he was fine, but it was in a giant scrum. So he did tell one reporter that the question he asked was stupid, but he was fine with everybody else. But I know I would never have had the confidence to say that on the air. I spent the first 16 years of my broadcasting career as the kid with these two, Cheek for a couple of years, but then Jerry Howard, these giants who were like 20, 25 years older than me. So I never developed that like confidence of, hey, you're the guy. And then by the time I got to be the old guy, I was only around for a couple of years.
Right. Well, we've lost everyone that's not a baseball fan, and that's okay. What can you do?
I'm sorry.
No, it's my fault. I get nerded out. I get excited, but this was really great, Mike. I really appreciate it. I hope you enjoyed it, and I think people will get a lot out of it. I hope, and I hope some of these fans are also baseball fans.
I hope so too. We didn't even talk about the panic attack that I had in the broadcast booth. We get back to mental health, but I don't want.
We still can if you want. I mean, I got a little time here. I'm worried about your time. If I would love. I got all night. I actually have that written down. Have you ever? What's the worst case of anxiety you've had while in the booth? So maybe we can bring it back. I'll warn people up front that we're going to just geek out on baseball for 10 minutes, and we'll come back to panic. Please tell me about it.
It was at the Trop, which is an awful place anyway.
It is.
And it was. It was in 2018. And this was before I had that first heart test, and I was a little concerned. There were times when the reason I wanted it was because I would get these like quick little dizzy spells, like less than a second, and it was all anxiety driven, as it turns out. But it was a getaway day. It was a day game after a night game, so I hadn't slept well the night before. And the hotel that we stay in was haunted, and that's a whole other thing, but that never affected me. But, and I was working with not my usual partner. He had that series off. So we had Jeff Blair, who's a wonderful former writer, now radio host up here in Toronto. And I'm working with him for the first time, and I really liked him. We get along well and all that stuff, but it's like 12:20 or so, and we're on the air at 12:30, and I'm starting to feel, a little grabby in the chest, and I'm not feeling right, and like the color drains from my face and stuff, and I don't know what to do because I'm with Blair, who's not a broadcaster, who's never, I can't leave him alone, right? And I'm thinking, if I'm having a heart attack, this is going to be really bad. But if I leave Blair alone to do this game, then we're totally screwed. Not that he couldn't have done something, but had my regular partner been in there, I would have gone down to see the doctor or whatever, the team doctor, and say, hey, I think I'm something's wrong. And I just sat there and I'm thinking, okay, this is really, really, really bad. And this could get even worse. But I tried to like distract myself. And I thought, all right, you know what? I'll try to do the open. And if I can do the open, then that'll be all right. And I did the open. And then we came back and I thought, if I can get through the top of the first, it's probably not a heart attack. And I don't know if there's any rationality to that at all. But that's what I thought. If I could just get through the top of the first, and I'm thinking, well, maybe it's probably panic, but it might not be. And I'm not the best flyer, especially out of Florida, where it can get super windy and super stormy a lot of the time. And so that's something that I'm anticipating as it's going to be a bad thing. And we're obviously flying out right after the game. But I just said, if I get through the top of the first, then it'll be okay. And I can't leave this guy alone. And I got through the top of the first, and then the bottom of the first started, and that went okay. And I started to feel a little bit better. And as soon as I started to feel a little bit better, I was like, it was a panic attack. I'm not going to die. I can broadcast the rest of this game. And even if I feel like this, I'm not dying. I'm going to be okay. So, so that's what got me through it.
God, that's like I've had the exact experience, and it's like what do you call, like triggering just hearing the story, because I know that feeling so well. I've done full 45-minute headlining sets where I'm just having an anxiety attack the entire time, and you start to see the light of like, okay, I think it's fine. I think I'm going to get through it. And I've done a late night TV set. I did Conan like that, same exact thing, and just going, all right, well, I guess I'm doing this one while having an anxiety attack. Luckily, I didn't think it was a heart attack. I knew it was a panic attack, but I knew, God, I don't want to have a panic attack on TV. But
yeah,
you kind of just hold on and accept and go, all right, I'm going to get through this. But it's
and brutal. I wonder if I listen back to that game, if there's any indication at all. And I wonder if you watch that set, or would people have told you, no, we had no idea that anything was going on?
Yeah, people have. They're like, because I've told people when they watch it, and they go, I had no idea. But that's the thing that's so fascinating about it, is like inside you're losing your mind, and maybe you hear little things in your voice or whatever. But no, it is a unpleasant feeling. But you got through it, and it helps me, because I'm like, my worst fear, and again, this is an Alan thing, is like your worst fear came true, having a panic attack on TV or on the radio, and it was fine. You got through it. So.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. And it's even triggering for me too, just talking about it. I'm like fluttering up a little bit, but such is the way these things go, I guess.
Exactly. So, well, Mike, thanks again. I don't know. I have to figure out if we should edit out the baseball stuff, but I like it. I say, fuck them. If they don't like baseball, then I don't want them as fans anyways, because I really enjoyed it. And I hope you did too. Thanks so much for having me, or being on, I should say.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It was wonderful. Thank you so much. I really appreciate getting the chance to talk to you, and getting a chance to talk about all this stuff too.
Yeah, it was fun. And what's the Twitter? Where can they read you, and where can they find you?
The Twitter is Willnerness, like wilderness, but with an N instead of a D there, because I tried to be cute or something.
I love it.
And thestar.com. I write for the Toronto Star, so all my stuff goes up on thestar.com, and there will be a podcast soon. So people want to hear my voice. A lot of people around up on this side of the border anyway. So we're going to have a podcast coming out as we get closer to the baseball season, and I have no idea where people can find that when that happens.
Wherever you get your podcast, that's always safe to say.
Wherever you get your podcast.
Yeah, that's something though. Awesome, Mike. Thanks so much, man. I really enjoyed the hell out of this. I appreciate it, and stay in touch. I love talking baseball.
Oh, that'd be great. Thank you. You're living a life that I would absolutely love to. So I'm thrilled to stay in touch with you.
Awesome. Thanks, Mike. I appreciate it. I'll let you know when this is all over.
Mindful Metal Jacket is hosted by comedian Joe List. Produced by Joe List. Edited by Matt Kleinschmidt. Executive producers Robert Kelly and Matt Kleinschmidt for the Laugh Button Podcasts.